Bé, hem tingut una mica d'ensurt a les tecnologies. Hello, Liam.
Hello. Yeah, I've just switched from my desktop to the laptop. So, is that okay?
It's fine. Yeah, we see you. We listen to you perfectly. Yeah. So, should we start? I'm gonna start with the Catalan presentation, if you don't mind. And then I get to you. Yeah.
I'll take this away.
It's very difficult, yeah. Sorry, we're just changing the architecture here.
Okay. While you do this, I'm going to start introducing the conference. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Doncs bé, benvingut a tothom, hola a tothom, en aquesta conferència internacional de la 52a edició de la Universitat Catalana d'Estiu. Primer que res, saludar-vos, donar-vos les gràcies per estar aquí en directe. Disculpeu aquests petits problemes tècnics que a vegades no es poden evitar. És una llàstima que bé, aquest any no podem retrobar-nos i saludar-nos en persona i mantenir aquelles tantes converses espontànies que tenim en el campus de la Universitat Catalana d'Estiu. I per això mateix un agraïment a l'equip rector, a tot el professorat, i en especial a l'equip de secretaria i als tècnics, com el Jan, que tenim avui aquí amb nosaltres, perquè són els que realment fan possible que, donades la situació excepcional i les obligatòries mesures en relació a la pandèmia del Covid-19, tot i així celebrem la UNCE, encara que sigui via online. Aquest enguany, la conferència internacional la centrem en el país, en la nació d'Irlanda. El títol és Irlanda, la Unió Europea i el dret col·lectiu dels pobles. Pensem que és un deute que teníem amb Irlanda. Com sabeu, durant tots aquests anys hem estat escoltant acreditades veus, reconegudes veus dels diferents països en lluita per l'autodeterminació i la independència, i Irlanda encara no havíem iniciat el que penso que és molt necessari, que és una conversa continuada amb diferents organitzacions i diferents acadèmics, activistes polítics, perquè l'actualitat d'Irlanda, quasi que els catalans, no ens arriba gaire, de veritat. Per tant, aquesta és una conferència que el que vol és això, iniciar unes converses continuades. Entenem que hi ha molt per actualitzar. Sembla que d'Irlanda ho sabem tot i potser no és el cas. Per tant, hi ha moltes coses a actualitzar i ho farem en aquesta primera part d'aquesta conferència. La propera setmana tindrem una segona part, però ara estem encantats de donar la benvinguda al professor Liam Kennedy. Welcome, professor.
Gràcies. Molt bona tarda.
El professor Kennedy, ell és professor de Queen's University of Belfast. Si em permeteu, i per no descuidar-me... Vaja. A veure, si em permeteu, per no descuidar-me, llegiré... Ell és professor, com dic, d'història a la Universitat Queen's de Belfast. Ara publicarà un llibre sobre el conflicte al nord d'Irlanda. Ell va néixer al sud d'Irlanda, a la República Irlandesa. Després va anar a treballar al nord d'Irlanda, precisament en aquesta universitat on està ara, a finals dels 70. Però abans havia tingut una estància de 4 anys a Anglaterra, a la Universitat de York. I per tant li agrada subratllar que ell ha viscut, diguéssim, a les tres jurisdiccions polítiques involucrades en el problema, en el conflicte del nord d'Irlanda, que és al Regne Unit, al nord d'Irlanda i a la República Irlandesa. També, comentar com a nota personal, oi? Que el Liam té un interès en el tema català i també amb l'estat espanyol, potser segur perquè la seva muller és catalana i també voler comentar que juntament amb el seu fill venen sovint a Barcelona i donen suport aquí al Futbol Club Barcelona. No sé si encara avui en dia, donada la situació, però són del Barça, bàsicament. I només, abans de ja donar-li la paraula al professor, una mica de context històric, oi? Perquè tots partim almenys d'uns bàsics, que segur que compartim, però que, tot i així, la República d'Irlanda va esdevenir com a tal després de 3 anys de conflicte militar al 1922. O sigui que és el 22 que la illa té partida amb el nord-est d'Irlanda, de la illa d'Irlanda, i el reste de la illa d'Irlanda. I ens referim a la part del nord com la part britànica. Hi ha una mica més, el tema la situació es complica en una profunda divisió interna que hi ha al nord d'Itàlia. Hi ha un sector molt unionista protestant i hi ha una població catòlica que el que vol és ser independent amb la resta de la illa i això provoca episodis tristos com els que coneixem, amb unes polítiques de terror al nord d'Itàlia que han afectat de manera òbvia les relacions internes, però també ha tingut una afectació en quant a les relacions entre Irlanda i el govern britànic. I entenem que això encara continua a dia d'avui i una mica entre tots, i amb els coneixements que ens aportaran els diferents ponents, veurem a veure de quina manera els companys irlandesos acaben tenint una exitosa sortida a aquesta situació. Així doncs, ara sí, donem la benvinguda al professor Liam Kennedy. So I just made a brief introduction of yourself and also updated, made a little bit of a brief general historical context. So now we can start the conversation with you, Professor Kennedy. The first question we would like to ask you, more than a question, is a petition in terms of if you could brief for us the Irish independence movement of the 20th and the 21st century. Not easy, but sure you will give us a little bit of a brief in your perspective, in your opinion.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Gracias. And sorry about the problems earlier on. And sorry about the problems for Barcelona Football Club last week. Yeah, Ireland achieved political independence in 1922, and that was after 3 years of conflict between the Irish Republican Army and British forces in Ireland. So you have 1922, almost 100 years ago, the formation or the emergence of an Irish Free State, an independent Ireland. However, there is a major complication, and that is that in the northeast of the island of Ireland, the majority of the people, about 1 million, mainly Protestant in religion, were in favour of remaining linked to Britain and were against Irish independence. So the compromise that came out was that the island of Ireland was partitioned between Northern Ireland, the northeast of Ireland, and the rest of the island. And in a way, the problems of partition have continued down to the present day. Now, let me say a little bit about Northern Ireland, which might be helpful. Southern Ireland, or the Republic of Ireland, is straightforward. It's an independent state, Irish nationalist, seeking to restore the Irish language, break links with Britain, and so on. And it's had its ups and downs over time. I come from the Republic of Ireland. However, the story in relation to Northern Ireland is much more complicated. It is true the majority of the people in the northeast of the island of Ireland did not want to be part of an Irish state. So you had a devolved government set up in Belfast, linked to London and Britain. And this was supported by about 1 million people. Southern Ireland was about, the Republic of Ireland was about 3.5 million people. The demography is fairly important, I think. The problem within Northern Ireland, though, was that you had 1/3 of the population, about 500,000, who were Irish nationalists and who wanted to be united with the rest of Ireland. However, because the British Irish, if you like, 1 million, were the majority, they dominated politics from 1922 until the early 1970s, when the Irish Troubles erupt in a huge way. I'll perhaps come back to that in a moment. When the Northern Ireland statelet or devolved government was set up, the nationalist minority was 1/3. However, nowadays, Irish nationalists and British Unionists in Northern Ireland are almost roughly equally balanced. So there's a very clear division down the centre. And the 1/3 Irish nationalists within the Northern Ireland state felt discriminated against, felt their national aspirations had not been achieved in 1922. So they were a fairly militant opposition throughout the first 50 years of the Northern Ireland state. And then in 1970, so I should go back one step. In the late 1960s, you have a civil rights movement in Northern Ireland, mainly supported by Irish nationalists within Northern Ireland, but some Protestants, British Irish as well. However, in 1970, and I should say that was a mainly peaceful set of demonstrations and so on. However, in 1970, you have the creation of a new IRA, a new Irish Republican Army, based mainly within Northern Ireland. And it seeks to achieve the reunification of the island through shootings, bombings, car bombs, various military-style activities. And perhaps, Anna, do interrupt me at any point if you want to come in. Which is to say, this military campaign, which we call the Troubles, a slightly strange name, but we call them the Troubles. It's important not to minimize how serious they were. I mean, almost 4,000 people were killed between 1970 and the year 2000. And about 40 to 45,000 people were injured through bombings, shootings, and so on. So it really is an armed insurgency on a major scale, because remember, this is within the context of a population of about 1.5 million, a bit bigger than Barcelona, but not a lot, or maybe not actually. Anyway, so what I'm saying is these casualties, you have to relate them to the quite small size of Northern Irish society. So it really is very severe. Is that okay, Anna? Did you want to come back?
Yeah. No. I mean, very, very interesting. And of course, as a Catalan, when it comes to probably to our mind is why that all this is not being settled by a referendum. But maybe we will come to this later on. I mean, what is interesting is that all this that you are explaining to us, probably it will be very well portrayed in your next book that you are publishing, a book that precisely is focused in the Northern Ireland conflict. The point about, if I may, to take a little bit of a parallelism, if you don't mind, is the concept of violence when there's no intention of violence, and how violence and the concept of violence can be used. And this is something that Catalans were very fond of, well, that we are very interested, in, because violence is being used by the Spanish state as a threat. And violence is being used by Catalan governments as an excuse. And at the end of the day, what you have is the population of Catalonia with a legitimate mandate that is not being fulfilled because of this violence that in Catalonia is not happening. And it's true that it has happened in other, unfortunately, in other territories in fight for the independence, Euskal Herria, Ireland. So Catalans, we may feel trapped by a violence that we only suffer by the Spanish state, that we never had an intention, nor we have to do so. But also, the point is, that's fair enough. We don't want to use violence because we're Democrats, and we think there are enough tools in our democratic societies to resolve these issues, as a referendum or a declaration of independence, that we know that internationally they do have they cushion the justification. So an expert in Irish, unfortunately British Irish conflict and violence. What do you feel when talking about Catalonia and our legitimate right to fulfill the majority desired, expressed by boxes in favor of independence?
Yeah, well, my view is Catalans constitute a nation. Catalans are a nation. They have a distinctive history, a distinctive language, distinctive cultural patterns that are different from elsewhere in the geographical space of Spain. So it seems to me it is perfectly legitimate for Catalans to say we want an independent Catalan state. And I accept your point that the violence has come from Madrid, from the Spanish state. And I am glad that you haven't responded in the way Northern Irish nationalists responded, say, in the 1970s, which was to a minority, admittedly, a minority supported the IRA. And the end result has been, after 3 decades of violence, that a united Ireland is no nearer than it was in 1970. Some would argue that peaceful demonstrations would have achieved a united Ireland by now. You know, it's 50 years since the outbreak of heavy violence here, and there is still no even majority support for a united Ireland. So in a way, I'm congratulating you on the peaceful and democratic means you have used, which strikes me as by far the most effective way of achieving an independent Catalonia. And, you know, people in Ireland and Britain and elsewhere in Europe were shocked by the violence of the Spanish state during the referendum campaign. You know, a very good Catalan friend of mine said to me at the time that, I mean, he was appalled by the violence, but he said, Madrid is a factory for the manufacture of Catalan independence. So, viewed from an Irish or British viewpoint, for that matter, Madrid has handled the crisis incredibly badly. It has done all the things that would actually produce stronger Catalan nationalism rather than the opposite. But I do have one big qualification. Can I enter that in here? There is the issue of majority rule. As I understand it in Catalonia, one out of every 2 people one out of every 2 voters are in favor of independence, but the other 1 out of 2 are not. And so it seems to me one of the lessons, I think, from the Irish case would be that there needs to be dialogue at 2 levels. One is with Madrid and with other regional governments, and with the European Union, perhaps putting pressure on Madrid. So that's one set of dialogues. And, you know, I understand at the moment it's the dialogue of the deaf. Do you have that expression? You know, where one partner is not listening. So I can understand from Catalan viewpoint it is difficult, but I think you just have to continue on. You know, it's a struggle to convince others, but you also, this is the qualification, I think you also have to convince the 1 in 2 people in Catalonia who are not in favor of independence, as I understand it. And that's hugely important because, again, if I could use the Northern Ireland example, you see, the British Irish, or the Unionists, if you like, British Unionists, had a majority in 1922 and for 50 years thereafter. And they made some efforts, but not a lot. They didn't make much effort to speak directly to the Irish nationalist minority within Northern Ireland. With the result, you have a civil rights campaign at the end of the 1960s, and that breaks down into a military campaign, rather like ETA, but on a much bigger scale, in the 1970s, the 1980s, and the 1990s. Now, I think that's the worst possible way to achieve political objectives. So I think Catalan nationalists need, as I say, not only to persuade through democratic means, through pressures from outside and so on, not only to persuade Madrid, but also to speak to fellow Catalans who do not agree. Because it seems to me, even if an independent Catalan state came about, it would be unstable, politically unstable, unless there is much, much more support for Catalan independence. See, I think it has to be more than 50% plus one person, otherwise I think it will be unstable. That, at least, it seems to me, is one of the messages from the Irish experience.
Well, that's thank you. That's very that's a lesson that I guess that we all are conscious and we bear in mind. Uh, well, we all, the Catalan nationalists or world nationalists, because there's a lot of Catalan independentists which are not nationalists. So let's say that all Catalans we want the independence of Catalonia, and I guess also in many other countries with the same fight. We are well aware of the need, and we are all open to dialogue. The issue, as you well said, is on the other side. And I think that one of the, to see what is your point of view, because one of the reasons may be that you may be more practical in order to seduce those ones that do not wish at the moment independence is precisely to have a more straightforward government that with their actions defending democracy and therefore people mandate prove with no censorship, no, proves that independence is possible and is a good thing for everybody, and it's legitimate, legal, and democratic. But I think that if there's that balance point in which you do need to be open to dialogue, but not to arrive to the point in which you will never have a chance because it's a cul-de-sac, because Spanish nationalism or in other countries, the state nationalism exists, and it's powerful because holds, at least in the Spanish state, the control of the judges or the media or what have you. So I guess that maybe one other solution is a regeneration of politicians for a generation that knows that the independences are not something, they don't need to be violent, they're all good news for everybody, and leaving aside all these state nationalism that influence people. So in a nutshell, governments that defend the idea that independence is possible, which at the moment, because of the threat of the Spanish state, it seems like they're all happy with a message that independence are not possible. And we have to bear in mind that we were not convinced to be inside the Spanish state. They basically occupied us, and we have been. And they don't care if they are not 50 plus one. They don't care. That's what dictatorships and totalitarian regimes and systems like today's that are still built on many Frankist structures. They don't care about if they are 50 plus one. So I agree on the dialogue point, but I guess that we need to broaden the solutions. It cannot be that it's all rest in the hands of those ones that occupied you. It needs to, right? It needs to be, and that's why I wanted to ask you, in terms of, yeah.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Linking this, and sorry because you give me a chance to speak, and then it's dangerous. But then linking this with the next question, that is, what about European Union, right? And what about well, the difference maybe of Europe and the European Union. I like to stretch always this like this back. This deep differentiation that is good to make. But European Union or Europe has actually won the Nobel Peace Prize. And we were very fond to portray ourselves worldwide as this continent, this territory of human rights, of democracy, the values of peace, of justice. What about these days, Professor Kennedy? Do you think Europe still has, with the political prisoners, with all the issues rising in Europe, how we deal, not the issues, how we deal with the issues, give us still this position in a worldwide scale? Can we still be proud to be the Europeans of democracy and the human rights?
Oh, I don't think we can be very proud, but nonetheless, I do see the European Union and, well, let's just simply stick with the European Union, because once you include wider Europe and Russia and Belarus and so on, it gets very complicated. Yeah, but in terms of the European Union, yeah, that legacy, that tradition of human rights, respecting individual freedoms, respecting democracy, democratic values, I think that is still, a very important part of European Union culture. It's far from perfect, but it's, when you think of the rest of the world, say China, where there is absolutely no respect for human rights and terrible repression, particularly of minorities, or you think of Russia, Putin's Russia, or the president of Belarus, if he hasn't resigned today, I don't know if he has yet or not. He may be on the way out. Compared to Donald Trump's America, which has really lost its way in the world, the European Union is still a bastion of freedoms, individual rights, democracy, human rights. How that relates back to Catalonia, of course, is tricky, because the European Union has, as I understand it, I could be wrong, has a dilemma. See, it's not in favor of secessionist movements. So it would see Catalan independentists as producing a fracture, a kind of a division within the European Union. Now, they may well be wrong to believe that, because Catalans are very pro-European Union, but viewed from Brussels, it does seem to be different. And because, well, if we could elaborate on that, I mean, I think what they would see as a problem is if Catalonia secedes from Spain and Scotland secedes from the United Kingdom, then maybe northern Italy parts of northern Italy might secede from the Italian state, and so on. You can see the kind of dangers. They're not bothered about Ireland, incidentally. They would be quite happy if Northern Ireland became part of the Republic of Ireland. That isn't an issue, but the others are more of a problem. But could I make a constructive suggestion?
Yes.
big difference between Britain's relationship to Northern Ireland and Madrid's relationship to Catalonia is that Britain, or London if you like, is prepared to accept the will of the majority of people in Northern Ireland. So if tomorrow a majority of people in Northern Ireland voted for Irish unity, they would be quite happy. Sorry, Anna, can I check? You've disappeared off my screen.
Oh, have I?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Do you hear me?
Yeah, but I can hear you.
Okay, well, I don't know why I disappeared. Maybe a connection,
Yeah.
but it's good because we hear you. That is the important bit.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, this is the positive proposal. I mean, I know Senior Puigdemont and others, some of those associated with him, I met in Belfast about 2 years ago. Incidentally, an economist, whose name I can't remember now, who's based in Scotland. Anyhow, it seems to me that, pardon?
So, excuse me, you said
Hello, Anna?
President Puigdemont and Clara Ponsatí, maybe?
Yes, I think that was it, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But my point is they are working in Brussels and elsewhere in the European Union to promote Catalan nationalism. However, it seems to me the crucial issue is, or what they might be pushing for, is something like the British relationship to Ireland. You know, just to repeat slightly, the British government is quite happy to see a reunited Ireland if a majority of the people in Northern Ireland agree to that, which they don't at the moment, but they might sometime in the future. However, the Spanish government's position is very different. Its position is, even if a majority in Catalonia vote for independence, they will not allow it. So maybe pressures in Brussels and elsewhere in the European Union should be focused more on getting the Spanish government to accept the wishes of the Catalan people, whatever they might be. I mean, they might be continuation of status quo, they might be some new settlement in which Catalonia has a lot more power, but it's still within a federal Spanish state, or it might be independence for Catalonia. But until Madrid concedes that right, you are in a very difficult position, it seems to me. And that's where European dialogue with European states might be helpful. I don't know if I made that clear. The British approach is much more accepting of people's opinion than the Spanish one.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could get to the position where the Spanish state accepted the same rules, if you like, as the United Kingdom state, you would be in a much stronger position. Mm-hmm. The Catalan people would be in a much stronger position.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I guess that from the Catalan position, and that's related to what very well you were putting forward, the thing of the domino effect. I guess that what we understand is that a democratic European Union shouldn't have any problem, shouldn't be facing any fear on the fact that finally peoples which are recognized in the Charter of the UN, peoples get finally to decide by themselves to be independent when the majority of them, you mentioned earlier, Veneto or South Tyrol or even Catalonia, it's an internal enlargement of the European Union. It's not like the majority of these societies want to drop out, which if they did, it's very democratic, but it's not the case. So really the bottom line is that the fate, the future of these peoples, of these societies, to be in hands of those states that are the ones provoking this situation of unsettlement. Because at the end of the day, what you have is millions, but millions of European citizens that we don't live as first-class citizens. We are second-class because we are all the time just worrying about our language, about our rights to progress with happiness. No? So I guess that you are completely right. We need to talk more to the European actors, but not so, I guess, not so much on the point of telling Spain to let us or not. This is completely unfair in a bottom line democratic way, but on the fact that everybody recognizes the right recognized in the United Nations. But yes, I mean, of course, that is the conversations to have. And staying in Europe, then, what do you think about this? Well, we know that the new president of the Eurogroup is precisely Irish.
Yeah.
Minister of Finance. Do you reckon? Do you believe that this is just like a gesture from European Union after Brexit? So some kind of recognition to the Irish people, or a message, a declaration of intentions to the UK government. How in Ireland have you received this news?
Well, obviously, people in Ireland are happy with it. However, I think you're reading too much into it. I think it is simply a case. Pascal O'Donoghue, the man you are referring to, was Minister for Finance in the Irish government, and a very successful one. So I think he had two advantages. One is he's a very strong candidate, a very good track record. And secondly, this sounds like boasting, but it's not intended to be, but the Irish in Brussels, Irish representatives in Brussels, have the reputation of being very good at persuading others to their point of view. So I think there was very effective lobbying by the Irish delegation. I think that's all that's in it. Yeah. It's part of the soft power. Do you know that expression, soft power of Ireland? Because
Yes.
nobody hates us, you see.
Okay, yeah. Soft power, yeah. That Catalonia tries also a lot of that power. uh, and going then to the reality of Brexit. How has Brexit affected not only politically but socially? Because in a certain way, I mean, it's like a hardening of the border, right? When there's so many people that actually don't want within an internal border, and Brexit seems to harden it. No, I have this because in Catalonia we have not heard many news like. There have been any social movement around this Friday good agreement. How it all gets related with Brexit?
Well, it's coming towards a conclusion, it seems to me, and clearly the United Kingdom has left the European Union. The details have to be worked out. The details on the border have been largely worked out. You're absolutely right that people in Northern Ireland, and unionists as well, British unionists, as well as Irish nationalists, were very concerned about a hard border, a land boundary. But it's largely been solved. There isn't going to be any significant land boundary at all. So in that sense, the border issue, which a year ago, if we had been talking a year ago, this would have been very big. It's not anymore. Essentially because Britain has compromised on the hard border. However, on the wider issue of Brexit and its implications for Irish nationalism and so on, that impact is quite significant. Yeah, it has strengthened Sinn Féin, which is the main Northern Irish nationalist party, which used to be linked to the IRA. And it's also alienated some Ulster Unionists, some British Unionists, who, especially liberal British Unionists, who want to remain with Britain, but they also want to remain within the European Union. So they feel a loss of European identity because of Brexit. So that is weakening links between Northern Ireland and Britain and strengthening links between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Now, I don't want to exaggerate it because it's hard to say how long-term the effect will be. We don't know the full impact of Brexit yet, but certainly it has given a boost to Northern Irish nationalism and to the campaign for a united Ireland. Over to you.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and then to end up, which is a very interesting conversation, Professor Kennedy. But I see that the hour is almost ticking. Mainly, a lot of the time we come to you, to historians, right, to result and to talk about the past. And, and actually, it's kind of unfair and mistaken because mainly those ones who have a better grasp of the past are the ones that can give us maybe a more certain prospection of the future. And so on this line, I would like for you to share with us how do you see the come up of the closure of the conflict, because there's still there is still a conflict. I mean, there's still, as you said at the beginning, 50%, and in Ireland as well, it seems that maybe because of the results of the last elections, political parties that go for reunification has also an increase in votes. So, but leaving this apart, how do you, as an expert on the past, do you see all this going for Ireland? And in fact, if you care to share with us, for all the rest of countries in Europe that, as you know, we are struggling for a fair ending of our democratic fight for independence, or in this case, reunification.
Yeah, say the future for the island of Ireland, I find it very hard to say, actually. I wrote an article in which I said there were two possible end games, two conclusions. One is a united Ireland, because the Sinn Féin movement, the main nationalist body, is growing in strength. So that's one possibility, that sometime, perhaps 10 years from now, there is a united Ireland. But again, there is a big qualification there, which is that not all Northern nationalists are in favour of Irish unity, which might seem like a contradiction, but it isn't. About 1/3 of Northern nationalists, so they vote nationalist, they vote for Irish nationalist parties who are in favour of United Ireland. But when they're asked, how would you vote in a referendum on Irish unity, about 1/3 of them say they would not vote for a united Ireland, mainly for economic reasons, and maybe some other reasons as well, but largely pragmatic reasons. So in their hearts, they are Irish nationalists, but in terms of the state they want to live in, roughly 1/3, a minority within a minority, roughly 1/3 say they prefer to stay within the United Kingdom state. So it's paradoxical, but it's the way it is. Now, if they can be persuaded by their fellow nationalists to vote in a referendum for Irish unity, then there will be a united Ireland, a reunited Ireland. The alternative perspective, I said I had two scenarios. That was one, that eventually there is a united Ireland. The other one is that the struggle, the conflict, the uncertainty will just continue on and on, year after year, decade after decade. And it really depends on the younger generations. And we know from opinion poll evidence that many younger people in Northern Ireland are reluctant to call themselves either British Unionists or Irish nationalists. A large minority of them will say, we are neither. So if that's a pointer to the future, then it means the second scenario, that Northern Ireland just continues as it is at the moment. Within the United Kingdom, we have all kinds of disputes and crises, and sometimes getting on well together. So I don't know, as a historian, I don't know. Those two seem to me the only two real possibilities, and they're completely, they're miles apart. Who knows? Oh, do you want to say a little about Catalonia? It's much better that you say it.
If, as you wish. I mean, it's just. I mean, the reality is that it has been very, very nice to have you with us. Thank you again for your time. If there is any other notes that you consider you wish to share with all of us, please say so. If
just one line, one sentence. I have great admiration for the Catalan people for not engaging in violence, in political violence. And I think not only democratically, but pragmatically, that is the right thing as well. But many other emerging nations have gone down the road of political violence, as we have, and it hasn't worked. That is all. Muchas gracias.
Moltes gràcies. Liam, thank you very much. As I said, I wish this to be the first of many, many conversations with our friends in Ireland, so we know better the reality of Ireland. And thanks to you and many others, but your book coming soon, sure we will be more enlightened about all these current affairs in your country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moltes gràcies. Bona tarda.
I bé, a tots vosaltres, els catalans que ens esteu seguint, doncs moltíssimes gràcies. Esperem poder oferir més parts sobre la conferència d'Irlanda properament. I si no, doncs, com sempre, l'any que ve esperem que ja amb aquesta normalitat del que alguns parlen, de la nova normalitat o la normalitat que sigui, però que ens puguem tornar a retrobar tots junts al campus de la Universitat Catalana de Prada. I gràcies als tècnics una altra vegada i a tots els que feu possible que hagin pogut tenir aquesta conferència online. Moltíssimes gràcies, salut i independència. I països catalans.
Gràcies. Adéu.